You know, Nia, I was looking at some market entry data recently, and it's wild how many tech companies land in Vietnam with a massive splash, only to realize a few months later that they're basically shouting into a void.
Exactly, Jackson. It's a classic trap. Welcome to the Vietnam Play podcast, everyone. We're diving deep today into why those initial campaigns often stumble, and more importantly, how to fix them. This episode is actually made possible by 43.1. They are the full-stack market entry partner for foreign tech, fintech, and Web3 companies looking to truly scale in Vietnam.
Right, and they really focus on that unit approach to avoid the common pitfalls we see in this specific region. It's interesting how a strategy that works elsewhere can just flatline here if you don't have the right local framework.
That's the core of it. We aren't just talking theory, we're looking at actionable fixes for when your campaign feels stuck. So let's dive into the diagnostic steps to identify exactly where your strategy started to veer off course.
Nia, I think the first thing we really need to unpack is this idea of the cultural friction that tech companies often ignore. They come in with a product that has been a massive success in Europe or North America, and they assume the value proposition is universal. But in Vietnam, the way people interact with fintech or Web3 is fundamentally different. It is not just about the language, it is about the underlying trust mechanisms.
You have hit the nail on the head right away. It is so easy to think that if you translate your app into Vietnamese, you have localized it, but that's just the surface. When a campaign fails, the first diagnostic step we often see at 43.1 is looking at the trust gap. In the West, we might trust a brand because of its sleek UI or its venture capital backing. In Vietnam, trust is often social and community-driven. If your marketing campaign is all about disruption and innovation, but doesn't show how you fit into the local community or solve a hyper-local pain point, it is going to fall flat.
That makes so much sense. So if a company realizes their campaign is failing, how do they actually start diagnosing that trust gap? Is there a specific framework or a set of questions they should be asking themselves?
Absolutely. You have to look at the social proof loop. For example, in the Web3 space, are you relying on global influencers who have no resonance in Ho Chi Minh City? Or are you engaging with local community leaders who actually hold sway in the Telegram groups and Zalo chats where the real decisions are made? A major pitfall is ignoring these local communication channels. If your campaign is heavy on X, formerly Twitter, but silent on Zalo, you are effectively invisible to a huge portion of the Vietnamese market.
It is like trying to sell a high-end car in a city that only uses boats. You might have the best car in the world, but the infrastructure, the social infrastructure in this case, just doesn't support it. I love that analogy of being invisible despite having a huge marketing budget. So the first fix is really an audit of your communication channels and your social proof sources.
Precisely. And that audit needs to be brutal. You have to ask, does a 25-year-old developer in Hanoi actually care about this specific feature, or are we just pushing it because it worked in London? We see this a lot in fintech. A feature that emphasizes long-term savings might not land as well as one that emphasizes social gifting or peer-to-peer rewards, because the cultural pace and the way people handle money in Vietnam has its own unique rhythm.
It sounds like the unit approach that 43.1 advocates for is really about having those local eyes and ears on the ground to say, hey, this message is actually coming across as cold or impersonal. It is about adding that human layer to a tech entry.
Right, because at the end of the day, market entry is a human-to-human endeavor, even if the product is a piece of code. If you are a foreign company, you are an outsider by default. To stop being an outsider, your campaign needs to reflect local values like family, community, and rapid growth, rather than just abstract tech benefits. If you find your campaign is stalling, stop the spend and look at your cultural relevance score. Are you speaking to the market, or are you speaking at it?
Speaking at the market. That is a painful image, but I think it describes about 80% of the failed entries we see. You are just broadcasting into the void. So the first step of the playbook is pause the broadcast, check the frequency, and make sure you're on a channel that people are actually tuning into.
You know, building on that diagnostic phase, I've noticed another common issue. Some companies go the complete opposite direction. Instead of being too generic, they overthink everything. They spend 6 months in research mode, trying to build the perfect strategy before they even launch a single ad. By the time they hit the market has already moved on.
Oh, the analysis paralysis trap. I see this all the time with fintech companies especially. They want every regulatory box checked, every single pixel of the UI perfectly localized, and a 20-page strategy document before they engage a single user. But Vietnam is a high-velocity market. It moves incredibly fast. If you aren't agile, you're irrelevant. The fix here is what we call the lean entry framework.
I love that, lean entry. It sounds like applying startup methodology to geography. How does that actually look in practice?
It means launching small, localized pilot campaigns to test specific hypotheses. Instead of a nationwide campaign, maybe you just target the tech-savvy demographic in District 1 of Ho Chi Minh City. You use a minimal viable message. If that resonates, you iterate. If it doesn't, you haven't wasted your entire year's budget. 43.1 really emphasizes this. You need to be a unit that can pivot in real time. If you're a foreign company with a massive HQ in another country and every marketing change needs to be approved by a committee in a different time zone, you've already lost the game in Vietnam.
That is a great point about the decision-making speed. I mean, if the local team or the local partner sees that a specific meme is trending on Vietnamese social media and it perfectly aligns with the brand, they need to be able to capitalize on that today, not in 3 weeks after a legal review.
Exactly. Speed is a currency in Vietnam. Think about how quickly the Web3 space evolves. If a new regulation is hinted at or a new local platform gains traction, you need to be there. One of the biggest pitfalls we see is rigid centralization. The foreign HQ wants to control the brand voice so tightly that they end up sounding like a corporate robot. The fix is guided decentralization. Give your local partners the guardrails, but let them drive the car.
Guided decentralization. I'm writing that down. It's about trust, isn't it? You have to trust that your local market entry partner, like the folks at 43.1, understands the nuances better than the person at HQ who has never been to a wet market or experienced a Hanoi rush hour.
It really is. And it's also about the tools you use. Are you using global enterprise tools that are clunky and slow? Or are you using the lightweight mobile-first tools that the local market uses? For example, your customer support. If you are directing people to a support ticket system on a website, you're going to lose them. In Vietnam, people want to chat. They want to message you on Zalo or Facebook Messenger and get a reply in minutes. If your perfect strategy doesn't include a fast response chat layer, it's not a perfect strategy for this market.
That is such a concrete takeaway. It's not just about the marketing, it's about the entire ecosystem of how the customer interacts with the tech. If the entry campaign fails, maybe it isn't the marketing. Maybe it's the fact that the onboarding is designed for a desktop user in a country with high-speed fiber, while your Vietnamese user is on a mid-range smartphone in a coffee shop with spotty Wi-Fi.
You've hit on a major technical pitfall: device disconnect. Foreign tech companies often build for the latest iPhone, but the reality of the Vietnamese market is a huge variety of Android devices with varying specs. If your slick campaign leads to an app that crashes on a 3-year-old Oppo phone, your campaign didn't fail, your technical localization did. The fix is rigorous testing on local devices and optimizing for the mobile-first, often mobile-only, reality of the Vietnamese consumer.
So to recap this part of the playbook, stop overanalyzing, start testing small, decentralize your decision-making so you can move at the speed of the market, and make sure your tech actually works on the phones people are actually holding. It sounds simple, but it's where so many big names stumble. We've talked about culture and speed, but we have to address the elephant in the room: regulations. Especially for fintech and Web3, Vietnam can feel like a labyrinth. I've seen companies get their marketing perfect, their tech is great, and then they get hit with a regulatory hurdle they didn't see coming, and the whole campaign has to be pulled.
That is the nightmare scenario. And it is why the full stack part of what 43.1 does is so critical. You can't just be a marketing agency. You have to understand the legal and compliance landscape. The common mistake here is legal optimism, assuming that because there isn't a specific law against something yet, it must be totally fine. In Vietnam, the regulatory environment is evolving. It is more about relationships and understanding the intent of the regulators rather than just the letter of the law.
That sounds incredibly tricky for a foreign firm. How do you fix a strategy that has run into a regulatory wall? Or better yet, how do you prevent it?
Prevention is about proactive engagement. You don't wait for the regulators to come to you. You work with local partners who have their pulse on the government's digital transformation goals. For example, if you are in fintech, you need to show how your product aligns with the government's push for a cashless society. If you can frame your entry as a solution to a national goal, you are in a much stronger position. The pitfall is being seen as a disruptor in a way that feels threatening to local stability.
So the pivot here isn't just about changing your ads, it's about changing your narrative. You move from, "We are the global leader in X," to, "We are a partner in Vietnam's digital future." That is a massive shift in positioning.
It's a total game changer, and it affects your marketing directly. If you are a Web3 company, you might need to be very careful with how you talk about investment versus technology. The fix for a failing campaign might be a complete rebrand of the messaging to focus on the underlying blockchain utility rather than the speculative aspect. This isn't just about staying legal, it's about building long-term sustainability.
I imagine this is where the unit concept really shines. Having a team that understands both the tech and the local law means you aren't constantly sending things back to a legal team in New York or Singapore that doesn't understand the nuance of Vietnamese administrative decrees.
Exactly. A unit approach means the legal, marketing, and tech teams are all in the same room, metaphorically and often literally, making sure the campaign is compliant before it goes live. If a campaign fails because of a regulatory gray area, the fix is often to find a local sandbox or a partnership with a licensed local entity. Instead of trying to go it alone, you find a local anchor that already has the trust of the regulators.
That makes a lot of sense. Don't fight the tide. Find a boat that's already cleared for the water. But what about the companies that are already in trouble? They've launched, they've realized they might be on the wrong side of a regulation. What's the immediate emergency fix?
The first step? Transparency. Reach out to local experts and, if necessary, the relevant authorities. Don't try to hide. Often the authorities are looking for cooperation and a willingness to adapt. Second, pivot your messaging immediately to emphasize compliance and local benefit. Third, audit your data privacy and security measures. Vietnam has been tightening its data laws recently, and if your campaign is collecting user data without being strictly compliant with local standards, that is a ticking time bomb.
It sounds like the fix is often about slowing down to go faster later. You might have to pause your aggressive growth for a month to ensure your foundation is rock solid. It's better to lose a month of growth than to be banned from the market entirely.
Precisely. It's about sustainable entry versus flash-in-the-pan entry. Many tech companies are so focused on their burn rate and user acquisition that they forget that in Vietnam, longevity is built on a foundation of regulatory harmony. If you look at the successful foreign fintechs in Vietnam today, they all have one thing in common. They invested heavily in local compliance and government relations from day one.
Nia, we've touched on trust a few times, but I want to go deeper into community. In the Web3 world especially, community is the buzzword of the decade. But what does it actually mean in the context of a Vietnamese market entry? Because I suspect it's not just a Discord server with a few thousand bots.
You're so right. The bot-heavy community is one of the most common pitfalls. Companies see high numbers on their Telegram or Discord and think, great, we're winning. But when they look at their actual conversion or retention in Vietnam, it's near zero. Why? Because those members aren't real. Or if they are, they're just there for an airdrop and have no loyalty to the brand.
So the fix for a ghost town community isn't more ads, it's more what? Human connection?
It's about hyper-local activation. In Vietnam, digital communities often mirror real-world social structures. Think about the cafe culture. People meet, they talk, they share tips. A successful market entry fix involves taking that digital community offline, hosting small, high-quality meetups in coffee shops in Saigon or Hanoi. These aren't conferences, they're conversations. 43-to-1 helps companies facilitate these because they know that one alpha user in a local community is worth 10,000 followers who don't even live in the country.
I love that idea, the alpha user. It's like finding the nodes in the social network. If you can convince the person who everyone else asks for tech advice, you've won the whole group.
Exactly. And the fix for a failing campaign often involves identifying why these alpha users are ignoring you. Are you too corporate? Is your documentation only in English? Or, and this is a big one, is your community management team based in the Philippines or India and using Google Translate to talk to Vietnamese users?
Oh, that's a huge mistake. Users can smell Google Translate from a mile away. It feels disrespectful, honestly.
It does. It says, we want your money, but we don't care enough to speak your language properly. The fix is hiring local community managers who understand the slang, the memes, and the current events. Someone who can jump into a Zalo group and have a natural, witty conversation. This builds relational capital. In Vietnam, people buy from people they like and trust. If your brand feels like a faceless foreign entity, you'll never build that capital.
So, if I'm a tech founder and my Vietnam campaign is failing and I realize my community is dead, the drill here is 1. Fire the bots. 2. Hire a local community lead who actually lives in the target city. 3. Move the conversation to where the people are, likely Zalo or Facebook groups. 4. Start doing small in-person events.
That is a perfect four-step drill. And to add a fifth, listen more than you speak. Use those local groups to ask, what do you hate about our app? Or what feature would actually make your life easier? The Vietnamese tech community is incredibly vocal and helpful if they feel you're actually listening. This feedback loop is the best market research you can get, and it's basically free.
It also helps with that analysis paralysis we talked about earlier. Instead of guessing what the market wants, you're just asking them. It's a real-time pivot based on actual user sentiment. It makes the whole entry process feel like a collaboration with the market rather than an invasion of it.
Collaboration, not invasion. I love that. That should be the motto for any foreign company entering Vietnam. If you approach it as an invasion, the local ecosystem will naturally resist you. If you approach it as a collaboration, where you bring the tech and the global expertise, but the local community brings the context and the direction, that's when you see explosive growth.
Let's talk about money for a second, or rather, incentives. We see a lot of tech and fintech companies try to buy the Vietnamese market with massive subsidies, discounts, and airdrops. It works for a minute, the numbers go up, but as soon as the incentives stop, the users vanish. It's like a sugar high followed by a massive crash.
This is the incentive trap. It's especially prevalent in Web3 and fintech because the goal is often rapid user growth to show investors. But in Vietnam, there is a very savvy hunter culture. People will sign up for 10 accounts to get a $5 bonus and then never use the app again. If your campaign is failing because your retention is terrible, the fix is to move from extrinsic rewards to intrinsic value.
Intrinsic value? That sounds great in a textbook, Nia, but how do you actually do that when your competitor is literally giving away free money to every new user?
It's about the utility fix. You have to identify a friction point in the user's daily life that your tech solves so well they'd use it even without the reward. For example, in fintech, is it the speed of the transaction? Is it the ability to pay a specific type of bill that no one else covers? In Web3, is it a game that is actually fun to play? Or a DeFi protocol that offers a real, sustainable service? The fix for a failing, incentive-heavy campaign is to de-gamify the reward and revalue the product.
So you're saying instead of a sign up and get 50,000 VND campaign, you might run a campaign that says, stop waiting 3 days for your money to clear.
Exactly. Focus on the pain, not the prize. Another common pitfall is the referral loop that gets abused. If you see your acquisition costs skyrocketing, but your active users staying flat, your referral system is being gamed. The fix is to add proof of activity or tiered rewards. Don't give the reward just for a sign-up. Give it when they actually perform a meaningful action on the platform. This filters out the hunters and keeps the real users.
That makes so much sense. It's about quality over quantity. And I suppose this is where 43.1's full-stack approach comes in again. They can help a company look at their data and say, hey, 70% of your new signups are coming from the same IP address range or are showing bot-like behavior. Let's adjust the campaign before you burn another $100,000.
Right. It's about data-driven course correction. If you're a foreign company and you're just looking at a high-level dashboard, you might see growth and think everything is fine. But a local unit will look at the quality of that growth. They'll notice that none of those users are actually depositing funds or using the key features. The fix is often to throttle and refine. Slow down the acquisition, fix the onboarding to ensure it's attracting the right people, and then scale back up.
It feels like there's a theme here of intentionality. Don't just do things because they're the standard marketing plays. Do them because they make sense for the specific behavior of the Vietnamese user.
Absolutely. And remember, the Vietnamese market is very social. If your incentive is something that can be shared or something that benefits a group, it often performs better than a solo reward. Think about group buying or community rewards. This aligns with the cultural value of the collective. If you can make your incentive model feel like a win for your social circle, you build a much stronger, more resilient user base.
So the playbook move here is audit your acquisition data for quality signals. If you're just buying ghosts, stop. Shift your messaging to focus on the core utility, the pain point, and redesign your incentives to reward actual engagement rather than just a click.
We've talked a lot about the external strategy, but what about the internal team? A common reason market entries fail is that the team on the ground, or the bridge between HQ and Vietnam, isn't properly equipped. There's a knowledge gap. HQ knows the product, but they don't know Vietnam. The local hires know Vietnam, but they might not fully grasp the long-term vision of the foreign tech.
This misalignment is a silent killer. It leads to friction, slow response times, and eventually a failed campaign. The pitfall is hiring executioners instead of strategists locally. Companies often hire people to just do the work that HQ tells them to do. But in a market this complex, you need local people who can challenge HQ and say, that won't work here, and here's why.
But that requires a lot of confidence from the local team and a lot of humility from HQ. How do you fix a team dynamic that is already broken?
It starts with the unit integration model. Instead of having the Vietnam team as a separate silo, you integrate them into the core product and strategy discussions. 43-1 acts as that bridge. They aren't just an agency you outsource to. They are a partner that sits between both worlds. The fix is to create a shared context. This might mean flying the local leads to HQ, or better yet, having the HQ leaders spend a week in Vietnam, not in a 5-star hotel, but on the ground, seeing how people actually use their tech in the real world.
I can imagine that being a wake-up call. Seeing someone struggle to use your app in the humidity of a Ho Chi Minh City afternoon because the glare on the screen makes your minimalist UI unreadable.
Exactly. Or realizing that your easy two-factor authentication is a nightmare because SMS delivery is inconsistent for certain local carriers. The knowledge gap isn't just about culture, it's about the technical and physical reality of the market. The fix is empathy-driven development. When the people making the decisions have actual empathy for the local user, the strategy fixes itself.
Another pitfall I see is high turnover. If your local team is constantly changing, you lose all that hard-won institutional knowledge about what works and what doesn't. Why is turnover so high in these market entry teams?
Often, it's a lack of ownership. If the local team feels like they are just following orders from a remote office and their feedback is being ignored, they'll leave for a local startup where they have more influence. The fix is to give the local unit real autonomy and clear KPIs that they help define. Don't just give them a user growth target, give them a product localization target. Let them feel like they are building the Vietnam version of the product, not just managing a satellite office.
That's a powerful shift. It moves the local team from staff to stakeholders, and I think that's a key part of 43-1 philosophy, creating that unit that feels a sense of ownership over the success in that specific region.
It really is. And for the listeners, if you feel like your Vietnam team is just going through the motions, that is a huge red flag. Your campaign is failing because the heart isn't in it. The fix is a reset meeting. Sit down, listen to their frustrations, give them the power to make changes, and align on a vision that makes sense for Vietnam. You'll be amazed at how quickly things can turn around when the local team feels empowered to actually lead.
So the playbook here. 1. Evaluate the power balance between HQ and the local team. 2. If the local team is just executing, pivot to a model where they are strategizing. 3. Invest in shared context. Get the decision makers on the ground. 4. Ensure the local unit has the autonomy to pivot without waiting for a weeks-long approval process.
Okay, Nia. Let's say a company has fixed their initial mistakes. They've localized the culture, they've got the regulatory side sorted, the community is growing, and the team is aligned. Now they want to scale. But scaling in Vietnam seems like a whole different beast than just entering.
Scaling is where the fragility of a strategy shows up. A common pitfall is linear scaling.
thinking that if you spend 10x more on the same ads, you'll get 10x more users. In Vietnam, markets can saturate quickly in certain segments, or the cost of acquisition can spike as you move beyond the early adopters. The fix is multidimensional scaling.
Multi-dimensional scaling. Break that down for us.
It means not just doing more of what you're doing, but doing different things as you grow. For a fintech app, this might mean moving from user acquisition to ecosystem partnership. Instead of just running Facebook ads, you start integrating with local e-commerce platforms, or partnering with traditional banks, or even offline retail networks. You scale by becoming more embedded in the daily life of the user.
So, you're moving from being an app to being infrastructure.
Precisely. And this is where the 43.1 full stack approach really pays off. They can help identify those partnership opportunities that a foreign company would never find on their own. The fix for a stalled scaling phase is often to look outside your own platform. Who else is your customer using? How can you show up in their world in a way that feels natural?
Another pitfall at this stage is brand dilution. As you try to reach a broad audience, you might lose the cool factor or the specific utility that made you successful with the early adopters. How do you scale without losing your soul?
The fix is segmented messaging. As you grow, you can't have one message for everyone. You need a strategy for the Tier 1 cities like Saigon and Hanoi, and a completely different strategy for the Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities. The needs, the language nuances, and even the tech literacy can vary wildly. Scaling sustainably means being able to run multiple distinct mini-campaigns simultaneously.
That sounds like it requires a lot of operational maturity. You can't just be a lean unit anymore. You need to be a sophisticated machine.
It does, but you can still maintain that unit mentality by keeping each segment focused. Another key to scaling is infrastructure readiness. We've seen companies scale their marketing, get a huge influx of users, and then their backend or their local customer support team collapses under the weight. The fix is predictive scaling, building the support and technical infrastructure before the marketing push, not after.
It's like building the highway before you invite everyone to drive their trucks on it. If you have a traffic jam on day one, people will just take a different route and never come back.
Exactly. In Vietnam, where competition is fierce and users have a lot of options, you often only get one chance to scale. If you blow it with a bad user experience during a growth spurt, it is incredibly hard to win them back. So the scaling playbook is: 1. Diversify your channels. Move beyond ads into partnerships. 2. Segment your audience. Don't treat the whole country as a monolith. 3. Over-prepare your infrastructure. Tech and human support must lead the growth, not follow it.
This feels like the stage where a partner like 43.1 becomes even more valuable. They've seen the scaling journey before. They know where the traffic jams are likely to happen and can help you navigate around them before you even hit them.
Nia, we've covered a lot of ground, from cultural friction and regulatory mazes to community building and scaling. Let's distill this into a real, practical playbook for someone listening right now who feels like their Vietnam entry is struggling. What are the first, most concrete moves they should make?
Okay, let's do a Monday morning action plan. Step 1, the reality check. Stop looking at your global dashboard for 5 minutes and look at your local Vietnamese data. What is the actual retention? Where are people dropping off in the onboarding? If the drop-off is high, your fix isn't more marketing. It's a technical and UX audit on local devices.
Step 2, the channel audit. Are you where the people are? If you aren't active and responsive on Zalo and Facebook Messenger, you aren't really in the market. Hire or reallocate someone to be your local voice on these platforms immediately. No more Google Translate, no more corporate speak.
Step 3, the alpha engagement. Identify 5 real influential users in your space in Vietnam. Reach out to them personally. Ask for their honest, brutal feedback. Why do they use your product? Or why do they use your competitor? Use that feedback to pivot your messaging by Friday.
Step 4, the regulatory scan. Don't assume you're fine. Have a local expert, like the team at 43-1, do a quick red flag audit of your current operations. Is your data handling compliant? Is your narrative aligned with national digital goals? It's better to find the red flags yourself than to have a regulator find them for you.
And finally, step 7, the partnership path. Look at your ecosystem. Who is already successful in Vietnam that isn't a direct competitor? Can you partner with them for a small co-branded activation? This is the fastest way to borrow trust and authority in a new market.
I love that. Give them a sandbox to play in. It builds trust, and it might just save your whole strategy. And step 6, the incentive pivot. If you're currently buying users, stop. Try a 1-week experiment where you focus entirely on a utility-first message. See if the users you get are higher quality. It might be a smaller number, but if they stay, they're worth more than 1,000 hunters.
And finally, step 7, the partnership path. Look at your ecosystem. Who is already successful in Vietnam that isn't a direct competitor? Can you partner with them for a small co-branded activation? This is the fastest way to borrow trust and authority in a new market.
This is such a powerful framework, Nia. It's not just about fixing a campaign. It's about re-entering with a more mature, more localized, and more sustainable approach. It's moving from being a foreign company in Vietnam to being a Vietnam-ready tech unit.
Exactly. And that shift in mindset is the biggest fix of all. When you stop seeing Vietnam as just another row on a spreadsheet and start seeing it as a dynamic, complex, and rewarding ecosystem that requires its own unique playbook, that's when the magic happens.
It really does. It's about respect. Respect for the culture, the regulations, and the users. If you bring that respect, along with great tech and a partner like 43.1 to help you navigate, the sky is the limit.
So, as we bring this deep dive to a close, I'm struck by how much of this comes down to being human-centric in a high-tech world. We talk about market entry like it's a military maneuver, but it's really more like a conversation. If you're a bad listener, the conversation fails.
That's a beautiful way to put it, Jackson. A failed campaign is just a sign that the conversation has broken down. The fixes we've discussed today, localizing your voice, empowering your local team, building real community, and aligning with local goals, are all ways to start listening again. They are ways to say to the Vietnamese market, we see you, we hear you, and we're here to add value to your world, not just our bottom line.
It's a powerful perspective. For everyone listening, I want you to take a moment and reflect on your own strategy. Where is the friction coming from? Is it a cultural gap, a technical mismatch, or maybe just a lack of local trust? You don't have to fix everything at once. Just pick one of the steps from our playbook. Maybe it's that Monday morning reality check, and start there.
Exactly. Market entry is a marathon, not a sprint. It's about continuous learning and iteration. And if you're feeling overwhelmed, remember that you don't have to do it alone. Partners like 43.1 exist specifically to be that unit that bridges the gap and helps you find your footing in this incredible market.
Absolutely. It's a journey worth taking, but it's one that requires the right map and the right guides. Seeing a tech company truly click with the Vietnamese market is one of the most exciting things in the business world right now. The energy, the growth, and the potential here are just unmatched.
They really are. Thank you all so much for joining us on this episode of the Vietnam Play podcast. It's been a pleasure exploring these fixes with you, and we hope you feel more equipped to turn your market entry challenges into opportunities for real, sustainable growth.
We really do. Take these insights, apply them to your own work, and see what kind of impact a truly localized approach can have. It's all about making that connection and building something that lasts.
Thank you for listening, and we wish you the best of luck with your ventures in Vietnam. Reflect on what we talked about, try one new thing this week, and keep pushing forward. Goodbye for now.